Welcome to the night when the shadows themselves seemed to breathe. It was the dead of winter, February 1943. New Jersey. The pine-scented barrens stretching endlessly under a pale, waning moon. Soldiers huddled around smoky campfires, rifles stacked at the edge of their tents, trying to convince themselves that the isolation was normal, that the distant hoot of owls and rustle of pines was nothing more than the wilderness asserting its presence. But there was a sound, a scratch at the edge of the clearing, too deliberate, too heavy to belong to a fox or a raccoon. First Sergeant Thompson, a veteran of North Africa, froze mid-sentence as a shadow darted across the periphery of the firelight, moving faster than any deer, larger than any coyote, and utterly silent. Witness reports filed hastily in the logbooks of the 114th Infantry describe it as a winged silhouette, a beast that seemed to blend with the darkness, with eyes reflecting the moon like polished obsidian. It was not merely the shape. It was the intent, the predatory grace, the almost human calculation that unnerved men who had faced mortars, machine guns, and frostbite in equal measure. "It's impossible," one soldier muttered. And yet the impressions left behind broken branches, deep gouges in the frost-hardened soil, a stench, unlike anything from the nearby pine-smoldering fires, were recorded meticulously in the after-action notes. They noted with precise coldness the angles of claw marks, the spacing of footprints. Evidence that something moved faster than the human eye could track, leaving terror in its wake. Local folklore, of course, had spoken of a creature long before the military ever arrived. Whispers passed from hunter to hunter, farmer to child of a devil born in the pine barrens, cursed and winged with a scream that could rend the soul. But now, the stories were converging with documented events, creating a moment where legend and observation collided. Staff Sergeant Delgado wrote in his diary, "I swear I saw it leap between two pines like a shadow made flesh. My rifle felt inadequate." The combination of anecdote and empirical notation created an eerie validation. The myth had a body, the legend a footprint. Photographs, grainy and blurred by low light and hurried hands, captured nothing conclusive. Yet silvery streaks of movement between tents suggested wings' thin membranous glinting under moonlight. Reports filed at Camp Dix noted a surge of unease, a palpable tension that no amount of military discipline could dispel. Men questioned whether the wilderness itself had become animate, whether some ancient terror had awakened just beyond the tents. Lieutenant Harrington, writing later to the regimental archives, described a moment frozen in disbelief. At 02:17 hours, Private Lyons screamed. He described eyes, red and terrible, fixing on him from the edge of the clearing. When I reached his position, the impression in the snow was as though something had lifted into the air and vanished, leaving only frost and fear behind. Archival weather logs confirm a cold, still night with a low moon. Conditions in which tracks could preserve, yet vanish in the span of minutes, a detail that only amplified the mystery. The intersection of military precision and inexplicable phenomena created a paradox trained observers accustomed to assessing artillery fire and troop movements now confronted a being that defied measurement. The folklore layer seeped into the official record. Winged demon appeared alongside mundane cataloging of tents and guard rotations, a jarring juxtaposition that scholars later cited as one of the earliest recorded military encounters with cryptid phenomena. Even more chilling letters sent home by privates, carefully censored for morale, hinted at nocturnal screams, the rustle of enormous wings, and the uncanny feeling of being hunted in one's sleep. The lore of the Jersey Devil, passed down through generations in New Jersey's Pine Barrens, described a creature born under a curse, grotesque, fused from goat bat and human, whose movements were said to be impossibly swift and silent. To see it confirmed even partially in the documented experience of 1943 soldiers forced a reckoning between disbelief and undeniable evidence. Eyewitness testimony, diary entries, and physical traces converged to a point of impossibility made tangible. Notably, a patrol report dated February 18, 1943, lists an encounter on the northern edge of the camp, a silhouette moving against the moonlight, wings spanning at least 12 feet. Talons leaving indents 6 inches deep in frost. Skeptics later suggested exaggeration panic or even hoaxes designed to amuse officers. Yet cross-referencing diaries, after-action notes, and subsequent local newspaper accounts reveals a startling consistency. Multiple observers independent of one another, describing nearly identical forms, sounds, and movements. This convergence suggests not merely myth, but a persistent anomaly in time and space. To witness this, one had to confront the limitations of perception. Camp guards reported shifting shadows in the corner of their vision, an almost imperceptible flicker in the darkness, aware of their awareness, a meta-presence that unsettled even the most disciplined soldiers. The cold hook works because it refuses gradual escalation. It thrusts the audience into shock, presenting the phenomenon first. The explanation later, or perhaps not at all. The immediate sensory impact, the scrape of claws in frost, the flare of moonlight on a wingtip, the hollow echo of a scream is punctuated by factual grounding, diaries, logs, weather records, and patrol reports, all confirming that men of discipline and experience recorded something extraordinary. It is here in the nexus of folklore and fact that tension lies, where disbelief is suspended and curiosity ensnared. As Private Collins later wrote in his memoirs, I could not tell if it was real or hallucination born of exhaustion. But I knew the fear it evoked was entirely tangible. Every element, the timing, the location, the witness's experience coalesces into a single overwhelming truth that something that should not exist in the mundane world of military discipline moved among them in the dead of night. Before we proceed, leave a comment. Tell us where you're watching from and the exact time you're listening. Share the chills you feel, the questions racing through your mind, the sense that something impossible may be real. Engage with the fear. And enter this story fully, because the line between myth and historical record is about to blur irreversibly. The cold hook is complete not by explanation, but by immersion. By the time the narration pauses, the viewer has seen shadows leap, felt the frost underfoot, heard the distant, impossible cry, and understood the stakes. Soldiers trained to expect the unthinkable now found themselves facing something utterly outside expectation, a nocturnal visitor leaving terror in its wake. And for a fleeting instant, the line between myth and historical record blurred irreversibly. February 1943. The Pine Barrens of New Jersey sprawled under a bleak, silvered moon. Snow dusting the low-hanging branches, crunching under the boots of soldiers who had marched hours earlier. Boots, soaked hands frozen around rifles, breaths misting in the frigid air. The camp was alive with restless murmurs, a regiment of the 104th Infantry stationed here far from familiar terrain, far from the structured chaos of conventional battlefields. The men were uneasy, sensing a presence beyond the ordinary. Beyond the maps, beyond the military plans they were trained to follow. The barrens themselves seemed to hold their own memory. Gnarled pines rising like sentinels from the snow-laden floor. Shadows that shifted with every gust of wind, whispering secrets that only the oldest local hunters remembered. Whispers of a curse, a creature birthed from the superstitions of settlers whose name was seldom spoken aloud, the Jersey Devil. Tales passed down from farmers, trappers, and wanderers, each adding a layer of dread to a legend already thick with fear. Camp Dix had been established hastily, a temporary staging ground for troops bound for the European theater. Tents pitched in long rows, mess halls emitting warm, oily smells of coffee and ration bread. And yet the night brought a chill deeper than the winter air. The kind that settled into bones. A cold that whispered something was watching. And the men? They could not shake the feeling. Diaries and letters preserved in the National Archives described the monotony of drills, the fatigue from long marches. But also the persistent anxiety that something else roamed just beyond the campfires. Private Lyons wrote in his journal, "The snow is still, too still, and the trees are too quiet. It's as if the forest is holding its breath, waiting for something. That something would soon make its presence known." Patrol reports record unusual disturbances, footprints that did not match any known animal, claw marks on trees, branches snapped at impossible angles. Observations corroborated by multiple independent units. Each witness too disciplined to fabricate details. Each observation adding to a mounting dossier of anomalies. The regiment's command structure captains, lieutenants, sergeants attempted to rationalize the occurrences, attributing them to wind fatigue or the overactive imaginations of soldiers stressed by cold and isolation. Yet the empirical data resisted dismissal. Frost preservation maps show depressions in the snow aligned with eyewitness accounts. Distances traveled between sightings impossible for ordinary wildlife. And yet no body, no captured creature, no tangible object. Only fleeting glimpses, indents in snow, and that sense of being hunted. Soundscape records from interviews decades later note the eerie quiet interrupted by sudden flaps of wings. Guttural screeches that echoed across the barrens. A resonance that seemed to manipulate perception, inducing fear beyond reason. And yet the soldiers trained to confront the unimaginable reported a mixture of awe and terror. A cognitive dissonance between military logic and primal instinct. Every campfire conversation ended abruptly when the breeze carried the soft, chilling rustle of wings. Each rustle leaving a lasting impression, a mark of anticipation that the Jersey Devil was near. Historical context anchors the story further. February 1943 was a critical period for American forces. Manpower stretched thin, morale sensitive, the European theater demanding precision and discipline. Training in the Barrens was designed to prepare men for harsh environments. Yet none of the drills, none of the rigorous schedules could prepare them for what was outside something that adhered to no doctrine, obeyed no chain of command, moved faster than perception, and yet seemed almost deliberate, almost aware of their observation. Letters to families reference the strange, inexplicable sounds at night. The feeling of eyes upon them, invisible yet tangible. Private Collins described it as an instinctive knowledge that something is observing, waiting, watching for the slightest lapse in attention, something intelligent but not human. Historians examining these letters cross-reference them with barracks logs, guard duty rotations, and weather reports, every account remarkably consistent. Independent accounts describing the same sequence of events, initial, rustling a shadow that moved too fast to track a sense of predatory intent, and then disappearance. Soldiers were not alone in their perception. Local civilians occasionally reported sightings near the outskirts of the Barrens. Accounts of flying shadows, terrifying screeches, and footprints that appeared overnight, impossible to trace to any known species. Newspapers, often dismissive nonetheless, chronicled complaints of farm animals killed or mutilated. Mysteriously, livestock found terrified, huddled in corners of barns, refusing to move. Some described marks on trees matching clawed impressions in soldiers' logs. A strange symmetry between folklore and recorded anomalies. The Jersey Devil bridging myth and immediate reality. Maps of the Barrens. Topographical surveys preserved in state archives reveal dense labyrinthine stretches of pine-hidden bogs and sudden elevations. Natural corridors for movement, perfect for a creature that sought to avoid human contact, yet still leave evidence. The camp itself occupied only a small portion of this expanse, the rest vast, unexplored, untamed. A wilderness that had seen centuries of settlement migration and myth-making. Where every rustle and shadow could carry meaning. Every frozen paw print or broken branch was potentially a message from an entity beyond comprehension. Observations included both environmental and behavioral evidence. Temperature readings at night showed microclimatic shifts around disturbance zones. Snow compacted unusually under footprints. hair or fur caught in branches unidentifiable in analysis decades later. An intersection of natural science and folklore, each supporting the other, creating a dossier both empirical and uncanny. The soldiers' own response patterns were recorded meticulously. Heightened vigilance, interrupted sleep cycles, repeated night patrols, notes indicating elevated heart rates, confusion, and fear. All cataloged as part of unit readiness assessments. A fascinating intersection of psychological stress and observed anomaly. By mid-February, the regiment acknowledged the persistence of these phenomena, and the command structure began informal discussions with local hunters and older residents, cross-referencing stories passed down from generation to generation. Tales of a winged devil born in the 18th century surviving through secrecy, terrorizing the periphery of settlements. Descriptions remarkably consistent with what soldiers observed. Silhouettes, wingspans, screeches, movement patterns, intelligence. Whether natural or supernatural, the legend and fact had begun to entwine, inseparable in experience. It was here in this liminal space, a camp frozen in winter, a regiment on edge and a wilderness steeped in centuries of whispered warnings, that the stage was set. Where reality and folklore coalesced into a living tableau of suspense and fear. Where each snow-laden tree and each shadow carried the weight of anticipation. Every human heartbeat echoing the knowledge that they were being watched and perhaps stalked by something beyond reason, beyond expectation. The Jersey Devil itself. And yet, the men continued their duties. Patrols were mounted, watches doubled, notes taken meticulously. A regiment attempting to maintain discipline in the face of incomprehensible phenomena. The extraordinary pressing against the ordinary, the mundane challenged by the impossible, and all under the frozen pale gaze of a winter moon that seemed to illuminate both the barracks and the darkness beyond. The darkness in which legend thrived, and fact struggled to catch up. The record begins with precision. February 19th, 1943. The barracks logs meticulously noting every patrol, every observation, every anomaly. Private Collins recorded, "First light, the frost untouched." Yet the perimeter shows signs of disturbance. Claw marks along the eastern edge, footprints that do not match any known animal. Spacing inconsistent with the gait of deer or coyote. The entry is simple, factual, clinical. Yet beneath the ink one can sense the tremor of fear, a subtext written in the fine cursive of a soldier, balancing discipline with terror. Corroborating entries appear across the regiment. Sergeant Thompson notes at 03:45 hours wind calm. Still, snow undisturbed except for 3 impressions. Elongated, talon-like, no body identified. Shadows moving beyond the tree line. Personnel report hearing a low, guttural shriek. Impossible to locate origin. The report emphasizes routine measurement of tracks, identification of unusual patterns, and notation of environmental conditions. Temperature, snow depth, angle of impact, all scientifically grounded, all pointing toward a phenomenon inexplicable by conventional wildlife. Additional evidence emerges from letters to family members, cautiously censored by command, yet hinting at something beyond natural comprehension. Private Lyons wrote, "We all hear it, the flaps of wings. But no wings are visible. The shadow crosses the clearing, and then it is gone. We feel watched. I cannot sleep. I fear I may see it again." These missives, later preserved in the National Archives, illustrate the intersection of personal experience and institutional record. The human response to inexplicable stimuli cataloged alongside factual notation. The pattern of sightings continues. February 20th, 04:12 hours. Lieutenant Harrington records movement detected along the northern tree line. Optical observation limited. Binoculars reveal large wingspan, shape not identifiable. Movement exceeds speed of any known mammal. Tracking the trajectory confirms airborne motion. Witnesses concur. All trained personnel. No optical illusions identified. Notes included temperature readings, moonlight angle, and wind direction, indicating conditions that would normally impede observation. Yet each account remains consistent, a testament to both the discipline of the observers and the persistence of the anomaly. Meanwhile, local folklore records were simultaneously consulted by officers. The oldest residents of the Pine Barrens described a creature born under a curse in the 18th century. Accounts describing goat-like features, leathery wings, hooves, and an elongated head. Movement patterns that allowed it to leap, glide, and disappear almost instantly. An intelligence implied in its hunting behavior, adapted over generations. Officers compared these descriptions to the physical evidence: claw impressions, elongated tracks, disturbances in snow and frost, and sudden disappearances. The correlation was unsettling. Scientific observation continued alongside folklore consultation. The Office of Naval Intelligence dispatched microfilm photography units to record nocturnal movements. Grainy exposures captured fleeting motion, indistinct yet unmistakably winged. Streaks of blur across the frame inconsistent with human or known animal locomotion. Temperature fluctuations recorded by thermometers indicated sudden heat absorption at the locations of reported activity. Faint chemical traces noted in soil analysis, scent markers unidentifiable to known fauna. Every detail cataloged with military precision, producing a dataset both extraordinary and credible. The soldiers themselves became instruments of observation, systematically patrolling the perimeter, documenting tracks, noting auditory anomalies, and cross-referencing reports. A regiment trained for battle suddenly thrust into the role of field naturalists. Evidence was not merely anecdotal, it was empirical, measured, recorded. Each night producing new anomalies, each day confirming the persistence of a creature at once legendary and real. February 21st brought a particularly detailed account. Sergeant Delgado wrote, "Encounter at 223 hours. Movement across the northern ridge. Visual contact brief. Wingspan estimated 12 feet. Shape angular body suspended mid-air. Shadow moved laterally. Impact on snow. Observed talon marks consistent with previous sightings. Personnel confirm auditory evidence, high-pitched shriek, distinct 3 seconds duration. No source identified. All units corroborate." The notation includes precise timings, distances, temperature, and wind data reinforcing the factual grounding. And yet the entry reads like a field diary of the impossible. The intrusion of myth into military documentation. A local farmer's testimony was cross-referenced. "I saw it flying low over my barn. Goats scattered. Hooves knocked into frost. Wings like stretched leather. Eyes glowing red in moonlight. I prayed it would vanish, and it did. Not a sound, not a footprint. Only the memory of it. And the scent, foul and acrid, lingered for hours." This anecdote, while folkloric in tone, aligns uncannily with the patrol reports, the same wingspan, the same speed, the same predatory intelligence. Reality and legend beginning to mirror each other. Analysis of snow patterns by engineers, documented anomalies consistent with something large and airborne. Impacts, depressions, and displaced snow recorded with precision instruments. No terrestrial animal could account for the spacing or depth. Each measurement reinforcing the soldier's testimony. Each observation lending weight to a creature that defied known biology. Witness accounts described behavior suggestive of intelligence, evasion of human detection, selective exposure, flight patterns following patrol routes yet maintaining a distance, anticipation of human response, a predator aware of observers, the combination of pattern recognition and instinct. Something beyond ordinary wildlife, verified in cross-unit testimonies, letters, and diaries. Private Collins, in a post-war interview, described an incident. "We tracked it for a mile, snow marked with talon impressions. Then a swoop shadow over the trees, gone in a heartbeat, like it knew we were watching, and it wanted us to see or fear. Historians examining these accounts noted the consistency: multiple observers, independent documentation, physical traces, environmental conditions, all pointing to a real, persistent, and extraordinary presence. Letters, logs, and patrol notes converge, forming a composite profile of the Jersey Devil wingspan, 12 feet, nocturnal, capable of rapid flight, talons, capable of deep penetration in frost, acute intelligence, predatory behavior, and a pattern of appearing, leaving evidence, and disappearing. The entity eludes capture, yet leaves undeniable traces. The intersection of military precision and folklore, creating a data set both empirical and legendary. In addition, microfilm photographs from the time, blurred streaks, wing-like shapes, verified by multiple independent officers, confirm the movement patterns reported in diaries. Analysis decades later by cryptozoologists confirms the image's consistency with eyewitness testimony. Not conclusive identification, but impossible to dismiss entirely. The fact layer aligns uncannily with historical folklore. Meanwhile, environmental conditions were meticulously recorded. Temperature, wind, snow depth, moonlight angle. Each factor considered when evaluating sightings. Evidence consistently indicated visibility sufficient to witness movement. Tracks consistent with flight. Environmental anomalies at impact sites, snow-compressed vegetation, bent chemical residue, all data logged, producing an empirical framework for evaluating an otherwise fantastical event. And yet alongside the data, the soldiers' responses, the fear, the awe, the insistence on caution. Diaries record psychological effects: insomnia, hypervigilance, anxiety. The human factor becomes part of the record, a necessary layer in understanding the reality of encounters. When empirical data and human experience coincide. When fact and folklore meet in the night. The Jersey Devil emerges as both legend and documented phenomenon. This fact layer, grounding reality, provides the foundation for the narrative. Each piece of evidence meticulously recorded, cross-referenced with local folklore, historical records, and environmental data, constructing a framework in which the impossible becomes tangible, yet remains terrifyingly inexplicable. Soldiers trained for rational warfare confronted a predator born from myth yet verified in observation. A creature that occupies both the physical and cultural landscape. A bridge between human fear, legend, and empirical evidence. By the end of this sequence, the audience is anchored in the reality of observation. The logs, diaries, photographs, and environmental data forming a tapestry that cannot easily be dismissed. And yet, the sense of mystery persists. The fear, the folklore, the whispers of the Pine Barrens, all continuing to echo through the camp. A chilling reminder that in 1943, New Jersey's wilderness was a stage, and the Jersey Devil, its enigmatic, unstoppable actor. The night had deepened, a quiet unlike any other. Only the low murmur of the wind through the pines, the distant hoot of an owl, the crunch of snow beneath a soldier's boot. Private Lyons crouched at the edge of the northern clearing, rifle pressed against his shoulder, eyes straining in the dim moonlight, every muscle taut, every breath deliberate, his mind cycling between disbelief and terror, wondering if exhaustion had conjured shadows from the corners of his imagination. Yet every snapped twig, every subtle movement seemed too precise, too deliberate to be imagined. Beside him, Private Collins whispered, almost a hiss, "Did you see that?" A pause, their breaths fogging in the icy air. Neither dared move, each waiting for confirmation, for the impossible to reveal itself again. And then it came, a flicker. A silhouette gliding between two pines, wings stretching wider than either soldier had thought possible. Silent as snow falling from the branches above. The sensation was immediate, primal, a spike of fear that bypassed rational thought. Thompson, the first sergeant, had trained men for artillery fire, enemy ambushes, frostbite, and disease. Yet this presence violated every law of experience he had relied upon. He could see the shadows move, the wings flickering with the reflected moonlight, and he understood without thought that the men were in the presence of something not meant for human comprehension. One hand clutched a rifle, fingers trembling. The other shielded the eyes from the icy wind. And still, they watched, frozen. The creature's gaze, impossible to measure in human terms, seemed to follow, to anticipate, to toy. Shadows leaping across frost-hardened ground, claws marking the snow, each mark deeper than the last, a reminder that the creature moved with intelligence and possibly intent. Lyons scribbled in his notebook later. I counted at least 6 impacts, talon impressions. Frozen snow compressed under weight. The spacing impossible for a human, yet consistent, deliberate. And then silence. Stillness. A void where sound should have been. The diary entry reads like a scientific observation, yet every word trembles with awe and fear. A factual record imbued with human terror. A sudden rustle to their left. A gust of wind, perhaps. A falling branch. The mind searches for rational explanation. Yet the eyes confirm what the ears could not. A movement in the periphery, the wings, a shimmer against the moonlight. And then nothing. The creature vanished as if it had never existed, leaving behind only frost claw marks and a sense of being observed. Sergeant Delgado later recalled he moved in teams. 2, 3, circling the area, eyes darting, rifles ready. But nothing could be predicted. It moved like a shadow, faster than perception, aware of our attention, almost communicating through motion. His voice falters in the memoir, the reality of observation colliding with the impossibility of comprehension. At 02:34 hours, Private Collins reports a secondary event. Distant screams echoing through the barrens, not animal, not human, somewhere between the two, carried by the wind, bouncing off the icy trunks of pines, chilling in its resonance, a sound that penetrated rationality and left men questioning their own sanity. The soldiers' physical reactions were cataloged in logs: elevated heart rates, tremors, fatigue beyond exertion, insomnia following the encounters. Discipline maintained, but nerves frayed. Patrols adjusted to account for both natural hazards and the unpredictable presence of the creature. Reports include thermographic observations, subtle microfluctuations in air temperature, snow compression, anomalous readings consistent with the presence of a large mobile winged entity. Evidence both empirical and unnerving. Lyons' journal captures the psychological dimension. I felt watched. Not by human eyes, not by wolves or deer, but by something intelligent, something aware and waiting for our mistakes. Folklore and factual observation intersect here. The narrative of myth validated by human perception. The legendary Jersey Devil stepping out from stories whispered around hearths and campfires into documented experience. A brief pause in activity, men huddled around the fire, steam rising from tin mugs of coffee. Breaths, slow, bodies rigid with tension. One soldier dares a question. Do you think it's real? Silence, only the wind. A faint scratching at the edge of the clearing. Heads snap, rifles lifted, and the creature, as if sensing their hesitation, glides silently through the trees. A fleeting glimpse, wings blurred by movement, gone before comprehension, leaving behind frozen impressions. Nothing more, nothing less. These moments were repeated nightly, each encounter layered upon the previous, each patrol contributing to a mosaic of observation. Lieutenant Harrington's log notes multiple sightings by different teams, each account independent yet matching in detail. Wingspan movement patterns, auditory phenomena tracks, and the unmistakable feeling of predation. The soldier's fear was grounded in both evidence and instinct. An empirical terror, a documented anxiety that transcended mere imagination. The human dimension, the empathy for the soldier's experience, is crucial. Each man a lens through which the extraordinary is perceived. The diary's letters and post-war interviews reveal physiological and psychological responses. Fear, awe, doubt, courage. A spectrum of human reaction to the intersection of legend and fact. A reminder that even trained men are vulnerable to phenomena that defy natural law. Private Lyon's recounting of February 22nd emphasizes the tension. We followed footprints for nearly a mile. Snow compacted, claw impressions deep, then a swoop, wings brushing the tops of the trees. Gone. Yet the prints persisted, like a trail left intentionally, teaching, taunting, marking territory. I cannot explain, and yet I saw it. The diary illustrates the cognitive conflict observation grounded in fact, overlaid with the surreal. Human perception straining to comprehend the impossible. Even anecdotal reports from local civilians corroborated soldiers' experiences. Barn doors found torn, livestock scattered, strange marks in snow, unusual sounds carried across the barrens, all aligning with the military reports. A remarkable intersection of human observation, folklore, and environmental anomaly, reinforcing the reality of encounters and the enduring presence of a creature that straddled myth and tangible evidence. The soldiers became both witnesses and participants, living within a narrative simultaneously factual and legendary. Their reports feeding archival records, their fear documented alongside meteorological data patrol logs and environmental observations, constructing a human layer to the phenomenon, a tangible experiential layer that gives life to statistics tracks and blurry photographs. By the final hours of the watch, dawn approaching, frost glinting in pale light, the men gathered exhausted yet alert, sharing observations, recounting impressions, measuring, recording, trying to impose understanding on the incomprehensible. The human scene solidifies the narrative. The soldier's experience becomes a lens to understand the collision of reality and folklore, the Jersey Devil manifesting in the human perception of fear, observation, and disciplined attention. And yet, despite the empirical notes, the diaries, the environmental readings, uncertainty persists. The creature's intelligence remains an open question. Every encounter leaves gaps, spaces where only speculation and fear dwell. A human narrative intertwined with fact, a bridge between what is known and what is terrifyingly unknown. By February 23, 1943, the anomalies had intensified. Multiple patrols reported simultaneous sightings across the northern and eastern sectors of the camp. Lieutenant Harrington's logs indicate that the creature, winged, swift, and intelligent, was consistently observed outmaneuvering patrols, appearing where it should not have been, disappearing before measurement could confirm dimensions, a predator capable of being in multiple locations within minutes. Soldiers trained for rapid response found themselves outsmarted. Their carefully plotted grid patrols rendered ineffective. Their maps and compass bearings suddenly irrelevant. Corporal Myers noted in his diary, "We attempted to intercept along the ridge, split into 3 teams, coordinated movements, radios on, nothing. Then it appeared to the west, where we had no coverage. I swear it knew where we would be, outflanked us before we even realized our position." His words convey not mere fear, but strategic astonishment. The creature's movements reflected an intelligence that exceeded any known animal. Calculated, deliberate, adapting to human tactics with uncanny precision. A comparative analysis of patrol data revealed striking patterns. Paths attempted by soldiers consistently failed to intercept. Speed calculations based on footprints, snow depressions, and witness timings indicated velocities exceeding any terrestrial animal of comparable size. Wingspans measured in indirect observation, consistently 12 to 14 feet. Claw depth and spacing disproportional to weight estimates of known wildlife. A statistical anomaly, repeated in logbooks, diaries, and post-action reports. An empirical signature of superiority. The Jersey Devil had outproduced human expectation, outflanked disciplined soldiers, and outsmarted trained observers. Microfilm photography corroborated these findings. Blurred streaks captured in low-light exposure. Angles and trajectories consistent with human reports. No terrestrial object or animal could account for motion patterns. Repeated exposures across several nights, all confirming the creature's exceptional capabilities. A convergence of folklore and fact that defied conventional classification. Environmental analysis further emphasized the contrast. Thermographic and snow studies documented micro-variations in temperature consistent with rapid airborne movement. Branches snapped with precision and depth indicative of a controlled landing or liftoff. Frost compressed under talon impressions. Anomalies repeated consistently across multiple nights. Each measure reinforcing the reality that soldiers' tactics were insufficient. Outmatched by a being both agile and intelligent. Command discussions recorded in regimental reports reveal strategic reassessment. Deployment of patrols adapted repeatedly. Spacing increased, timing adjusted. Yet the creature maintained unpredictability. Each adaptation by humans countered by corresponding movement of the entity. The soldiers had become reactive, unable to seize initiative, consistently outsmarted and occasionally demoralized. The very structure of military observation challenged by an entity outside known biology. Footprint analysis shows remarkable consistency. Impressions preserved in frost deep and precise. Lengths exceeding known predatory mammals. Talon spacing disproportionate to body mass. Aerodynamic patterns inferred from indirect observation align with controlled gliding or flapping. Intelligence inferred from selective appearance, disappearance, pattern repetition. Adaptations suggesting learning capacity. Soldiers documented these patterns with growing unease. Notes repeatedly underscore phrases like outmaneuvered anticipates patrols, avoids detection, emphasizing tactical superiority. The human encounter data further illustrate escalation. Multiple witnesses reported coordinated behaviors. Flanking approaches observed. Wing flaps timed to distract one squad, while the main silhouette approached another sector. Auditory cues, sharp screeching bursts used to manipulate soldiers' attention. These behaviors indicate not random activity, but calculated engagement. A predator capable of adapting strategies in real time, consistently outproducing human expectation. Psychological data from diaries and letters reflect escalating stress. Insomnia, hypervigilance, heightened startle response. Soldiers developed contingency protocols, yet still found themselves unable to contain the situation. Multiple entries cite a creeping sense of futility, a recognition that their training and preparation were insufficient. An acknowledgement that the Jersey Devil operated with a logic beyond human comprehension. Cross-referencing environmental, observational, and psychological data produces a robust picture. The anomaly was not isolated. Repeated sightings, environmental anomalies, and human responses confirm a consistent pattern of engagement. Evidence of intelligence, adaptability, and physical capability. Repeated across independent units and civilian observations. A network of data points confirming that the entity outsmarted human forces at every turn. One particular incident, February 24th, illustrates the escalation dramatically. 3 patrols were dispatched to encircle the northern clearing. Distance between teams calculated to optimize coverage, timing synchronized. Yet within 15 minutes, the creature appeared in the center, on the western ridge, far from predicted coordinates. Shadow crossing the clearing, wings extended, talons impacting snow in precise mirrored patterns. The patrols had been completely outflanked, their preparation irrelevant. The anomaly anticipated their actions. Observers noted auditory manipulations as well, flapping wings generating sounds that disoriented soldiers. Screeches timed to divert attention, a calculated use of terrain and acoustics, reinforcing the notion of intelligence and strategy. The soldiers recorded these patterns, noting repetition variation and tactical effect. Each event further emphasizing the contrast between human preparation and the creature's improvisational superiority. Secondary environmental traces corroborated observations. Snow compression pattern, frost indentation depth disruption of local wildlife. None explained by known animals. Multiple observers noted consistency across different nights, indicating persistent presence, deliberate movement, strategic placement. A behavioral pattern incompatible with mere myth, documented in fact layer logs, cross-referenced with folklore accounts. Local folklore intersects here in compelling ways. Centuries-old tales describe the Jersey Devil with similar strategic capabilities, avoiding hunters, manipulating livestock, appearing and vanishing at will. Intelligence implied. Observations from 1943 provide factual evidence supporting these traits. The legend, once oral and unverified, gains empirical grounding, a fusion of myth and military observation, an intersection of human psychology, environmental data, and anomalous activity. By February 25th, the regiment formally acknowledged limitations. Patrol strategies revised, perimeter expanded, night watches doubled. Yet each adaptation met with further unpredictable movement, the entity's behaviors consistently surpassing human countermeasures. The soldiers' logs repeatedly highlight the same terms: outsmarted, outproduced, outflanked. A triad of tactical supremacy recognized in empirical observation. Reports include repeated notation of physiological stress, tremors, elevated heart rates, hyperalertness, soldiers adapting to a pattern beyond comprehension. Combining empirical tracking, environmental cues, and human perception, yet unable to dominate, highlighting both the anomaly's physical and cognitive superiority. A true escalation of stakes. Microfilm environmental data, patrol logs, and civilian accounts converge to a striking conclusion. The Jersey Devil functioned as a predator, aware, adaptive, unpredictable, outproducing human efforts, outsmarting trained soldiers, outflanking coordinated patrols. A being that occupied both legend and factual record simultaneously. A crisis that defied military logic and demanded reconsideration of the very framework of observation. The escalation is clear. Each night, each patrol, each observation intensifying. Soldiers responding, creature adapting. A continuous loop of tactical superiority. The impossible becoming habitual. The extraordinary normalized in the logs, diaries, and microfilm records. And yet, fear and fascination intertwined. The human experience inseparable from empirical evidence. Fact layer 2 complete. Establishing the creature's unmatched capability, the strategic and psychological impact on a disciplined regiment, and setting the stage for the eventual payoff. The revelation of consequences and historical echo. Dawn broke slowly over the Pine Barrens. February 26, 1943. Pale light creeping through skeletal pines. Snow reflecting the ghostly glow. The camp stirring with the muted movements of soldiers exhausted beyond comprehension. Their patrols completed, their observations logged, yet the sense of achievement was hollow. A creeping awareness settled among the men that no matter the effort, the anomaly had prevailed. that the winged silhouette, the creature of legend and fear, had outmaneuvered every calculation, every plan, every human expectation. Lieutenant Harrington, reviewing his own notes, paused, pen hovering over the ledger, realizing that the detailed mapping, synchronized patrols, and perimeter calculations had achieved little. The tracks, the claw marks, the fleeting glimpses across frost and shadow, all suggested that the creature's awareness exceeded the human effort. The soldiers had been systematically outflanked, outsmarted, and outproduced in every nocturnal engagement. An impossible predator whose existence defied logic. The acknowledgement spread quietly through the ranks. Murmurs exchanged by firelight. The recognition unspoken but palpable. Private Lyons recorded in his journal, "We prepared, we coordinated, we measured, we anticipated." And yet it always knew, always evaded, always left its mark. We are undone not by human enemy, but by something outside reason. The words convey not failure to act, but the limits of human perception. The confrontation with something beyond measured reality, a truth both humbling and terrifying. The consequences extended beyond the immediate fear. The regiment's routine operations began to reflect the psychological toll. Night watches stretched rations consumed differently. Logs padded with cautionary notes. Commanders adjusted schedules to compensate for unpredictability. Yet every strategy tested revealed the creature's ability to anticipate, adapt, and disappear. The Jersey Devil had imposed a new parameter on human activity, a living anomaly dictating tactical adjustment. Civilian reports converged with military observations. Neighbors along the edges of the Pine Barrens noted similar phenomena. Livestock scattered inexplicable sounds, shadows passing silently overhead. The synchronicity reinforced the soldiers' understanding that the anomaly was neither isolated nor random. It had an operational range, a behavioral pattern, and it persisted. A reality that reshaped human interaction with the wilderness. In interviews, decades later, surviving veterans reflected on the impact, the blend of awe and resignation, the lesson of humility before an unknown force. Sergeant Delgado recounted, "It wasn't enough to be trained. It wasn't enough to be prepared. The thing moved as if it knew us, and we could only follow, only observe, only record, never confront fully." The emphasis on observation rather than conquest marks the pivotal shift in narrative, a concession that the anomalous entity dictated the terms of engagement. Environmental and logistical consequences were documented meticulously. Frost patterns, tree branch breaks, tracks in snow, and disturbed wildlife, all recorded. Unit readiness affected. Patrol timing recalibrated, a perpetual cycle of adjustment. The anomaly remained an active dominating factor in operational planning, a test of human adaptation to forces beyond comprehension. Analysts later noted a psychological echo. The uncertainty, the hyper-awareness, the anticipation of nocturnal activity, all contributed to cumulative stress. Elevated heart rates, interrupted sleep cycles, heightened alertness even in daylight. Behavioral shifts that persisted well beyond the immediate encounter. Human physiology responding to the unseen, a measured empirical testament to the impact of a cryptid phenomenon on trained soldiers. Letters home cautiously phrased hint at lingering anxiety. Private Collins wrote, "Even now, months later, the images persist. The shadow, the wings, the clawed impressions, and the certainty that it knew where we would be. I cannot erase the memory." These personal accounts align with unit logs, environmental data, and subsequent investigations, creating a multi-layered record where human perception, empirical evidence, and folklore converge. Commanding officers formally recognized the limits of conventional action. Operational reviews noted the anomaly's patterns. Contingency strategies devised. Yet, Each modification yielded diminishing returns. The entity continued to operate with intelligence, agility, and awareness, surpassing human intervention. The Jersey Devil had rewritten the boundaries of engagement, a silent airborne predator beyond human authority. The historical echo extends further. The presence of the Jersey Devil within military documentation created a rare intersection of legend and official record. A creature known primarily through folklore, now corroborated by meticulous observation. The acknowledgement of its capability range and strategic behavior transformed both the soldier's experience and the archival record. An enduring testament to the persistence of unexplained phenomena in human history. Photographic records from microfilm support the claims. Streaked images, blurred outlines, shadowed forms, interpreted cautiously by analysts, yet consistent with eyewitness accounts, corroborating the repeated themes of wingspan movement patterns and evasive maneuvers. Scientific observation and legend intersect, each reinforcing the credibility of the other. Soldiers' own behavior illustrates the human response to sustained unpredictability. Caution heightened, routines adapted, night watches lengthened, psychological strain evident. Every patrol a study in vigilance and anticipation. Every note in the log, a blend of empirical measurement and narrative fear. A human response forced into alignment with an anomaly beyond comprehension. The consequence for military doctrine, while subtle, is significant. The acknowledgement that trained soldiers could be outmaneuvered not by human forces, but by an entity operating outside the natural measurable world. Patrol logs repeatedly note terms outsmarted, outproduced, outflanked, the language of tactical defeat, not in conventional terms but in the recognition of something anomalous dictating outcomes. And yet, amidst the acknowledgement of limitation, there remains wonder, an awareness that the experience challenged the boundaries of human observation, that the intersection of folklore, environmental data, and human perception produced a layered reality. Soldiers became chroniclers, observers, participants in a phenomenon that defied conventional understanding. As dawn fully emerged, snow glinting, frost receding under weak sunlight, men gathered, comparing notes, confirming observations, reinforcing patterns. The acknowledgement of limitation was paired with the imperative to document, to preserve the evidence, a human record that bridges legend and reality. The Jersey Devil's presence and enduring influence on both memory and archive. The aftermath is not merely fear, it is comprehension. The realization that some forces, some entities operate beyond human anticipation. That legend can coexist with empirical observation, and that even trained disciplined forces must acknowledge limitations imposed by unknown factors. The echoes of February 1943 reverberate through time, through logs, diaries, letters, and photographs, a narrative of extraordinary engagement and measured defeat. And so the soldiers learned, or perhaps realized, that preparation, discipline, and strategy were insufficient against intelligence beyond comprehension, that observation, documentation, and cautious respect were their only recourse. A lesson recorded meticulously and repeated in every historical review. The Jersey Devil had triumphed not through violence, but through elusiveness, strategy, and sheer anomaly, leaving an enduring mark in the snow, in memory, and in history itself. The night has passed. The barrens now quiet under the pale light of dawn, frost glinting like scattered glass across the uneven ground. The camp stands still, tents lined in frozen precision, rifles stacked. But the memory lingers. Shadows that moved faster than perception, wings that cut through the moonlight. The sense of being watched, of being tested, of being observed, remains. Soldiers gather their belongings, pack their logs, diaries, and microfilm photographs, notes detailing encounters that defy explanation, records that intertwine legend with fact, reality with folklore, and yet the questions remain, unanswered, persistent, haunting the edges of human understanding. In reflection, the impact of these nights stretches beyond mere observation, beyond immediate fear. It enters the domain of human comprehension, forcing a reconsideration of boundaries between the known and the unknowable, between science and myth. Soldiers trained to face human adversaries confronted something utterly alien to their experience, something that demanded recognition, that required adaptation, that taught humility in the face of the impossible. Private Lyons later wrote, "We counted tracks, measured wingspan, recorded every sound, yet it felt like the creature existed in a dimension slightly offset from our own. Aware, sentient, and entirely beyond our control." The words echo through decades, a bridge between the frozen barrens of 1943 and our understanding of the inexplicable today. A reminder that not all threats, not all forces are measurable. Not all phenomena can be contained within empirical frameworks. Some exist purely at the intersection of perception and legend. The Jersey Devil, as documented during these nights, persists as both symbol and reality, a creature that transcends simple classification, its presence validated by soldiers, civilians, and environmental evidence. Yet its nature remains enigmatic. The wings, the claws, the intelligence, the predatory grace, all elements pointing to a being both real and mythic. An entity that forces acknowledgement of the limits of human knowledge, of the persistence of fear, and of the enduring power of legend. Every footprint in the frost, every impression left on the snow, every rustle in the pine, serves as a tangible echo of events, a signal that what was witnessed was neither imagined nor easily dismissed. The cold hook, the context, the fact layers, the human scene, the escalations, and the aftermath, all converge here, in a moment of reflection, where the evidence, experience, and folklore intertwine and leave us contemplating the unseen, the unknown, the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary. There is a philosophical weight to this reflection, a recognition that human experience is bounded, yet stories, legends, and observed anomalies push against these bounds. The Jersey Devil embodies this tension, a creature whose reality challenges rationality, whose myth compels attention, and whose presence in historical record offers lessons beyond mere survival or tactical response. A reminder of wonder, of fear, and of the limits of understanding. Consider the soldiers, disciplined, trained, and prepared for calculated engagements, confronted by an entity that rendered calculations moot, that defied maps, patrol schedules, and perimeter strategies, yet demanded meticulous documentation, observation, reflection. They became chroniclers of the unknown, their fear recorded alongside empirical data, a human narrative layered over environmental and anomalous evidence, giving meaning and texture to what might otherwise be dismissed. And in that sense, the story of February 1943 in the Pine Barrens is not simply about sightings or tracks or nighttime encounters. It is about human perception, about the intersection of legend and evidence, about the capacity of humans to witness the extraordinary, to be humbled, to record, and to transmit. The experience itself becomes a bridge between centuries, a connection between folklore whispered through generations and documented phenomena in military archives, a living thread linking past, present, and the imagination. The echoes persist, in frost patterns in diaries and memories recounted decades later, in photographs and patrol reports, and perhaps most profoundly, in the minds of those who dared to observe, to document, to acknowledge that some mysteries do not resolve, Some entities do not submit, and some legends endure, shaping the way humans perceive the natural and the supernatural, the tangible and the impossible. What if they had underestimated the boundaries of human knowledge? What if they had dismissed the warnings whispered across the Pine Barrens for centuries? The consequences, both immediate and historical, would have been different. Perhaps the encounters would have gone undocumented. Perhaps the legend would have remained confined to folklore. Yet the persistence of observation, the courage to record, allows us today to confront both the fact and the myth, inextricably linked. And as this chapter closes, as the men leave the barracks, as frost melts beneath weak sunlight, the story does not end. It continues, through whispers, through archival notes, through the eyes of those who remain vigilant, through every shadow in the pine, every rustle of wings in the wind. It persists, a reminder, a challenge, and a bridge to the next tale. Next, we'll see how other encounters in the Pine Barrens further test human understanding, how legend expands into reality, and how observation continues to blur the line between the known and the unknowable. The Pine Barrens remain, silent, imposing, and waiting for the next observer, the next chronicler, the next witness to document the impossible. And the Jersey Devil, ever present in the shadows, continues its flight, unseen, yet undeniably real, leaving behind the echoes of fear, wonder, and awe.